Hi everybody, it's Couple Indemnity. We are a film podcast about the love of cinema by two very dedicated film fans. I'm Hal, and as ever, I'm joined by Izzy.
Hi everyone.
Well, it's been a while since we've done a TV episode for the podcast. I know primarily we say we're a film podcast, but we do love our select standout episodes of TV drama, particularly me. Fool's War, I think, was the last one we did last year, which was last August. So Sherlock Holmes was the one I wanted us to do and cover for the first time. I'm a massive fan of this Jeremy Brett series from the 80s. It's been on my list for many years to show it to you for the first time, and there's a few more I want to cover. But as an English teacher, you're very familiar with the character, aren't you, and the legacy of the detective sleuth.
Yeah, I mean, I teach, primarily I teach the Speckled Band. I've taught the Red-Headed League, Scandal in Bohemia, and the Blue Carbuncle as well, if that's how you say it. I hope so. But that one less than the others. But definitely the Speckled Band I teach every year. And I really enjoy that story. But again, whenever we do kind of whodunit or crime kind of TV or film, it's not kind of my primary genre.
No, so you wouldn't primarily call yourself a fan of Sherlock Holmes?
No, it's not like I don't settle down in an evening and like curl up with a Sherlock Holmes story for pleasure.
No, so you never did the Hound of the Baskervilles?
It's too long. We only teach the short stories.
The short stories, okay,
like
that makes sense.
We don't do Sign of Four. I mean, Sign of Four is actually on the GCSE syllabus, but it's not. We do Jekyll and Hyde instead. Yeah.
I mean, this for me is one of the standout of the adventures of Sherlock Holmes, which I think are the short stories, and these were the first series of the Granada series that they released in the 80s, and some of these early ones are the real standouts. But for me, most of my early knowledge and affection for Sherlock Holmes comes from, as I said, this series, but also the earlier Basil Rathbone movies of the early to mid-40s. Now, these ones weren't as loyal to the actual Conan Doyle stories. A lot of them were set like contemporary times and they kind of adapted the stories to wartime mysteries, or wartime settings from Conan Doyle's actual mysteries. So they kind of loosely adapted them and fitted them around that contemporary setting. But Rathbone was such a contrast to the Jeremy Brett we see in this. Rathbone was far more classically smooth Hollywood style, and Nigel Bruce was his bumbling and buffoonish Watson sidekick. This Granada series, for me, just took the idea far more seriously and authentic, and really kind of portrayed that moody and melancholic nature of Holmes. And Jeremy Brett, we'll discuss him later, but he was known to be extremely meticulous in his preparation, almost to a method level. And for me, that's the reason why he is the ultimate Holmes. You're probably familiar with the more modern Benedict Cumberbatch series from the last 10 or 15 years, but Brett as Holmes is the ultimate, and he is the ultimate portrayal of the persona that I think Conan Doyle put across in his stories. And we're going to do a few of these episodes across the next year or so, and he really is quite extraordinary. So, no trailer for this episode. I couldn't actually seem to locate one. We've got an interview and extract with David Burke, which we'll play later in the episode. So we'll get straight into this one. So, Sherlock Holmes, The Dancing Men, first aired on ITV on the 1st of May 1984. Adapted, of course, from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, starring Jeremy Brett and David Burke. Directed by John Bruce. The synopsis here. Elsie and Hilton Cubitt live at Ridlingthorpe Manor up to the day when a line of stick-like figures drawn on a bench frightens Elsie out of her wits. Hilton, distraught, comes and seeks advice from Holmes. So, the actual story here. This couple living at Ridlingthorpe Manor, Elsie and Hilton Cubitt, it's a massive manor house, isn't it, in Derbyshire. They're out tending to the garden, and Elsie spots these figures of dancing men drawn on
some sort of like the wall of a fountain or something like that.
Wall of a fountain, yeah. And it absolutely freaks her out, and she runs off into the house and locks herself in her bedroom. And Hilton Cubitt is obviously mystified by what this is and why it's triggered such a reaction. And the next scene we then see at 221B Baker Street. This is the second episode now. Well, the first episode was...
Scandal in Bohemia.
Yeah, the first episode had been Scandal in Bohemia. So
That's what they start with. That's such a strange choice to start the show with. Because I always think like A Scandal in Bohemia is good because it subverts everything you know about Holmes. But you have to build up a picture of Holmes first in order for A Scandal in Bohemia to kind of work.
Yeah, I think it was... I'm not sure if they'd actually filmed it in that order, funny enough, because they released them all in 1984. But the first one released was Scandal in Bohemia for this series. This was the second one. Now, this is your first peek into the home life of Holmes and Watson. What was your first impressions of their relationship in this first scene with them?
I mean, it's a classic Holmes-Watson dynamic, with Watson just being kind of like the bumbling idiot. That's why I like Sherlock, because it looks different. Like Martin Freeman playing Watson just takes on a different edge.
I don't think David Burke plays him buffoonish or anything. I think he plays him very amiable and very just a down-to-earth guy.
I don't really feel like I necessarily saw enough of him in this limited episode to have made...
No, we might not be able to analyse the characterisation too much because I think you'll need a few episodes for that. But this guy, Hilton Cubitt, approaches and he talks to Holmes about his life and how he met his wife, how she came to America. But there's something that's very obvious from Holmes' questioning, is that he doesn't know much about her previous life in America.
Yeah, it's clear that she's a lot younger and that he kind of fell in love with her and didn't feel like he needed to ask any questions about...
Well, also, she asked him to promise to her that he would never pry into that and never demand to know about.
I mean, it's an immediate red flag, really, isn't it?
It is a bit of a red flag, absolutely. And the fact that he can just accept that and just kind of continue as in the future, he doesn't need to know about any kind of dangerous past that she may have had, or if there's going to be any repercussions to that in the future. So he tells Holmes and Watson all about the dancing men, and I think Holmes is instantly kind of drawn to this kind of symbolism behind the dancing men. So they're obviously writing out the messages and trying to decode them. Yeah,
because they repeat some of the symbols, so they're trying to work out and break the letter code, basically, of what each symbol represents. And I think this is where you're going to hate that I'm kind of going in straight away on this episode, but this is where I sort of take a bit of issue with the episode, because I just think they solve it way too quickly and way too easily, this code. They break it really quickly. There doesn't seem to be any kind of build in suspense when it comes to struggling to break the code.
No, but I mean, you may find this in a lot of these episodes because they're only 55 minutes. So there isn't an awful lot of time to play with in terms of building that long-form mystery.
Yeah, I guess I'm just comparing it to other short stories that I know of, like Speckled Band, where there actually does seem like they don't solve it until the very end, when they have to do the Midnight Vigil sequence. Yeah,
the climax of this and the revealing of the mystery happens about halfway through, when there is an incident in the house after Hilton Cubitt has returned to Derbyshire, and he wakes up in the night, and what does he see?
What, Elsie trying to sneak out the house? That's what happens first, because there's another message that appears on the door. So he takes that to Holmes.
Well, after he's gone back to Derbyshire, then he starts to see the messages appearing more and more dotted around the house, like on the front gate. He's asking all of the staff about what may be going on, and he starts to suspect that it may be some of them, or if there's another figure that he isn't aware of who Elsie may know about, because he's also getting suspicious about Elsie's behaviour around the house, like she's sneaking around a lot.
And the fact that he catches her burning a letter that's addressed to her from America, and she burns it without even opening it.
Yep, exactly. So they have a couple of these minor confrontations dotted throughout the first half of this episode, but there is a real reluctance to have it out and to really delve into the the difficult history or something that Elsie may be hiding. And it all leads up to this moment where Hilton wakes up and Elsie isn't there, and he walks downstairs and hears this commotion going on, and then goes into the room where it's all happening, and we don't see that. We just hear these two big gunshots.
Yeah.
So one of the next messages that Hilton Cubitt has returned with, it spells out the name via the decoded letters that they can make out from the dancing men, that it spells out this character name of Abe Slaney. Holmes has telegraphed off to the Chicago police about who this character is, and it's obviously, in those days, you couldn't get a very quick response, so there's a lot of waiting around for the answer as to who this guy is. Eventually, by this point, the same morning that this incident has happened in Derbyshire, Holmes has had a telegram back saying that he is one of the most dangerous men in Chicago. At the same time, they've also received a letter at 221B Baker Street. It's a forwarded message that Hilton has sent to Holmes, and it says, "Elsie, prepare to meet thy God." Now that alone, and the telegram from the Chicago police, means that Holmes and Watson are already rushing up to Derbyshire on the first train. There at the station, they bump into a station porter,
who reveals that Hilton is dead.
Has been shot dead.
And that Elsie is
also severely wounded.
But they say something about it's okay, she'll probably avoid the gallows, so it's clear that there's a heavy suspicion it was her that killed him because there was nobody else there.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So the main action flashpoint has happened about halfway through, and I understand what you mean in the sense of that's what it's all been leading to, and it's happened too early for you.
I also just feel like there's not enough in the way of culprits, like people who could have done it. It's like, oh, there's this one guy, we've solved the code, it's him. Yeah, and there's no kind of, oh, is it or isn't it?
Yeah, because we aren't aware of who Abe Slaney is ourselves. So to us, he's not a culprit. We know that there's someone probably on the outside who is threatening Elsie.
Yes.
But it's not a classic, like, it could be him, it couldn't be, because we don't know the backstory. So we're kind of learning this backstory at the same time Holmes and Watson are.
And again, I know I keep taking it back to this story, but it is the one that I know best. I think why Speckled Band works so well is because you see the villain very early on in the story, and so then really it's trying to figure out how he's done it and got away with it, rather than just revealing the man kind of late on. With that, for me, there isn't really that build-in suspense for this character, because all we're going by is being told he's dangerous. We don't get to see him. We don't get to make that jump on our own. We're just told he's a dangerous man. And when Holmes is questioning the staff at the manor following the bodies being found, Holmes is talking to the footman, I think he is, and asks him... He asked him if there's a farm...
A farm, but how has he got that information?
If he knows the name.
How has he got that information?
I think it's another decoded message.
Yeah, so he asks the footman about this particular farm. I can't remember what the name of it is called.
He says, does this name mean anything to you? And he says it, and then the footman says, oh, that's a nearby farm.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so he obviously suspects that that's where Abe Slaney is staying. If he is under suspicion that Slaney has been at the house and is involved with this murder, they have to find some way to coax him from there, so they need to send him a letter at wherever he's been staying. Holmes has decoded this particular location or farm name from the previous message.
But the previous message was from Abe to Elsie saying, meet me at this farm.
Yeah.
And so I think what then they try to do is to trick Abe to come to the house by sending
Yep.
a coded message with the dancing men, as if because he won't know about Elsie being shot.
That's right.
Well, he does, but
Supposedly.
saying like, oh no, he wouldn't know because she does it to herself once he's fled.
No, but I've always thought, like, we now see through flashback that that's exactly what happens. But the fact that she shoots him herself.
He's already fled out the window.
Barely a minute later. Like, how would he not hear another gunshot?
Yeah, that's true.
Arise suspicion and run to his supposed lover's aid. Yeah, that confused me a little bit. So there is a confrontation. Once Abe Slaney has been coaxed to the manor to meet Elsie, this is where Holmes apprehends him. And with the assistance of the Derbyshire Constabulary, I always enjoy in Sherlock Holmes the interactions between the local detective inspectors and Holmes, because they're all just so confounded by his genius, stuff that they're not able to perceive.
Yeah.
It's similar in a way to Poirot, that you get a lot of these entertaining interactions with the local inspector on the case and Poirot, who is just clearly on another level in terms of his sleuth capabilities and what he can perceive.
I think that's interesting, because obviously, like, thinking about the Victorian time period, really, really sounding like an English teacher. So the police was like quite a new, as in like a organised police force was still a really new concept, especially like the Metropolitan Police. It had been like kind of running wild for years, and it was like the first time it was really kind of organised, and there was still a lot of like lack of trust in the police, and they weren't kind of trained properly. And this is when people were obviously scared about crime because it's on the rise, especially in the like metropolitan areas with the Industrial Revolution. And so that's why Conan Doyle knew that people would be interested in this. And it's interesting when we're talking about other Sherlock Holmes that have been adapted to like modern day, because the Benedict Cumberbatch one, the police like hate him.
All right.
They
Really?
hate him.
Okay.
Yeah. Because there's a female police officer in episode 1 of Sherlock, and she detests him. She calls him a psychopath. She says the reason he gets close to cases is because he's a psychopath, and that if he didn't have kind of a slight moral compass, then he would be a serial killer. So that's like the Benedict Cumberbatch characterization of Sherlock for me is so fascinating, because he is genuinely like not just a genius, but like actually psychopathic.
Well, yeah, I mean that they do insinuate that a lot, and they do in this with the Brett portrayals, because he is so on the spectrum and he's so eccentric that people just can't work him out half the time. So you could almost make that assumption that he may be a psychopath himself, or definitely.
Yeah,
I can see that.
But I just find that an interesting, like, when they set it in Victorian England, there's this kind of like bewilderment and awe around Sherlock, but when they set it in the modern day, they actually hate him because they just think that he's meddling and getting in the way.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I've not seen that kind of way of doing it at all in any of the others. So Abe Slaney eventually confesses to the coded dancing men messages that he had been sending Elsie, which were all being burned, which forced him to come to the house and try and visit her, to confront her, to come back to America. Now, what the connection is that Elsie's father, we're told, was the highest men in the criminal underworld of Chicago, and it was almost like an arranged marriage between this guy Abe Slaney and Elsie.
Yeah.
And Elsie had fled America for that reason and wanted to start a new life, and met Hilton Cubitt. So this is what the confession is, and that led to the confrontation between Hilton Cubitt and Slaney. Hilton Cubitt had tried to shoot Slaney in that double explosion of 2 shots at once, and Hilton missed, which enabled Slaney to flee. But obviously Hilton took the fatal blow before Elsie attempted to commit suicide. But we see in the final outro narration from David Burke and David Burke does a lot of these narrations throughout the episodes, and it's really interesting when we get to one of the pivotal episodes, the Reichenbach Falls episode and the final problem, which is essentially when Conan Doyle killed off Sherlock Holmes and then had to bring him back through popular demand at the time, because they were so popular. And those episodes that in the Jeremy Brett series, for me, are some of the finest in the series. And yeah, through the narration, we're told that Elsie was able to spend the rest of her life at Ridlingthorpe Manor. So the first Jeremy Brett episode for you, and not one that you were particularly impressed with overall.
I think it's just hard to kind of gauge an opinion about the whole thing based on such a short episode. But
think
it's not. I don't think it's the most developed or suspenseful storyline.
I think you'll need to see a few to maybe form more of an opinion on it. You know. Well, let's talk a little bit about the trivia of the series. So the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, this kind of first series of it in the 10-year cycle, were produced by the British television production company Granada Television, who were under the ITV network between 1984 and 1994. They adapted 43 of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's stories into 36 one-hour episodes across 4 series, with Jeremy Brett as Holmes, and Watson was played by David Burke for the first 2 years until he was replaced by the great Edward Hardwicke in 1986.
Do you know why that change happened?
Yes, I do, and I was going to mention it when we came to David Burke, and apparently it was because he had an offer at the Royal Shakespeare Company to join the company, so he left this role. And for me, when I watched both of them, they both have a very amiable, easygoing way of playing Sherlock Holmes, and I can't decide who I prefer. And there's some really good episodes with Edward Hardwicke as well, so I'll be interested to see how you think, or who you prefer, and how you think they compare. But I think the first 2 or 3 episodes will do have David Burke in them. So let's talk about the cast. Jeremy Brett as Holmes. So from this first episode, how do you kind of gauge him in comparisons to any others you've seen?
It's funny that you say he's quite eccentric, because I found him actually not very eccentric. And again, it's very hard to gauge off of one episode, because I know that there are short stories where his kind of drug taking, and I know it's briefly mentioned in this episode, but that plays more of a part in some stories than others.
Well, I mean, if you find him not eccentric, then I'd be intrigued to see how you find Basil Rathbone, because he is the most straight-laced, smooth Holmes you'll ever get.
Yeah.
And classically, he's almost like an English gentleman.
But most of my knowledge of, well, not knowledge, but most of my watching of Sherlock has been either Benedict Cumberbatch's Sherlock or Robert Downey Jr.'s film version.
Oh, right. And there's loads of film versions of Holmes, particularly for 1 or 2 films. Some great high-profile actors who played the roles, but didn't continue for a long-standing series. But for me, as I said, Jeremy Brett is the standout. And he's a fascinating acting figure.
I've also seen, I think it's Henry Cavill who plays Sherlock in Enola Holmes, which is the Netflix series. And I think Sam Claflin plays Mycroft, the brother?
Yeah. So it's fair to say you're familiar with all the modern adaptations and portrayals of Holmes, yeah. Brilliant.
And then they've just released, it's my Easter holiday watching, they've released Young Sherlock, which isn't, I know you're not a massive fan, which is Guy Ritchie, I think, doing him when he's younger.
Yeah, that would take some persuading to get me to watch
I didn't say watch it with you. I said I will be watching
I can't think of the last thing that Guy Ritchie's done that's good, to be honest. But yeah, going back to Jeremy Brett, he was a fascinating figure of acting, and a lot of the legacy was how he famously wanted to take on the character. And we're going to hear in this interview with David Burke that he actually carried the novels around with him on set on the day and really tried to get into the persona of the character. Very method, but he'd emerged in the 60s as a classically trained stage actor. Years before this, was initially married to Anna Massey, but he struggled a lot with his mental and physical health throughout his life. He never really disclosed fully his sexuality, because he married another actress in the 70s after Massey, but he was involved with relationships with a lot of male actors throughout his life. Talked very candidly in the last few years of his life at the end of this series in the early 90s about his struggles with depression. He died sadly far too young at the age of 61 in 1995 while still filming this series. So we'll obviously be talking a lot more about his extraordinary performances in further episodes to come, like Hound of the Baskervilles, which I referenced so much. But Brett himself had performances in some movies we may cover. Apparently he was in My Fair Lady.
Right.
He was in War and Peace in the 50s. He must have been quite young then, with Audrey Hepburn. And he was in the 70s horror film with Richard Burton, The Medusa Touch. So we're definitely going to be talking about him again. Probably it will be Holmes immediately, but we may cover him again in movies. So, David Burke as Watson. For me, I really like his portrayal, but I also like Edward Hardwicke as well, and I can't decide who I actually prefer. But yeah, he was another classically trained actor who was in loads of TV from the 60s to the 2000s. And as I said, he was in the first couple of series across the first 13 episodes before he joined the RSC in 1986, 2 years after this, when Edward Hardwicke replaced him. We're definitely going to see him in The Solitary Cyclist, which I think is the third or fourth in the series, which I think is really good. He's still around today at the age of 91. Apparently he had a small role in the Daniel Radcliffe version of Woman in Black.
Yeah, does he play the I can't remember the character's name. He's named. Isn't he the guy who's on the Pony and Trap?
He could be.
I think we need to check that.
So looking up, David Burke was a police constable, but he must have been a fair age by that point to be in that movie, which I do rate as well, actually. The Woman in Black, I think it's worth us doing, and probably my favourite thing I've seen Daniel Radcliffe do. But
How dare you?
I also didn't realise this until I looked it up, that David Burke is the father of the actor Tom Burke, who is in everything these days. He's in loads of modern British dramas. And they even appeared in a Ghost Stories for Christmas episode together in 2006.
Right, yeah.
Which is interesting.
Oh, isn't Tom Burke... Oh, we talked about him. He's the guy who played, like, young Orson Welles in something.
In Mank.
He looks so uncannily like Orson Welles, it's creepy.
Yeah, he does. And a young Orson Welles. We also saw Tom Burke in The Hour as well.
Yeah, of course we did.
He plays the love interest.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the other cast members. So Tenniel Evans as Hilton Cubitt. He was an actor who appeared in heaps of British TV from the 60s to the 90s, including episodes of Z-Cars, Doctor Who, and then later even in Inspector Morse. The only film appearance I think we'll see him in will be the Richard Attenborough, John Christie movie, 10 Rillington Place, which is on my list. Betsy Brantley as Elsie Cubitt. She was an American actress who appeared in big movies in the 80s and 90s in films like 5 Days, One Summer with Sean Connery. She was also in The Princess Bride, Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Say it 3 times fast, I dare you.
And at the time of her younger stardom, she was married to the big Hollywood director Steven Soderbergh. Eugene Lipinski, finally, as Abe Slaney. He was a Canadian-British actor who I wasn't aware of at all looking at his work, but he had a lot of smaller supporting appearances on films that we'll cover, like Sophie's Choice, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the last one with Sean Connery. And apparently he also had an uncredited role in Octopussy as well. The director, John Bruce, was a British director who'd cut his teeth on loads of quality British television in the 70s on anthology series like Tales of the Unexpected and a lot of the quality TV films like the BBC Play for Today series. He also directed 3 more of the episodes from this Sherlock Holmes series, so we may well be mentioning him again. So what was your final rating is?
Okay. I thought that it was an interesting first experience of Jeremy Brett's Holmes, adapting what is a very unfamiliar Sherlock Holmes story to me. I didn't find it a particularly complex story, but there are moments of tension and provocation. Particularly that like early garden scene where you're kind of actually, it's a POV shot really, like you are in the bushes looking at Elsie, and Elsie kind of looks at you down the camera and looks terrified and runs off. So I actually thought that bit was very effective at the beginning. I thought, it's classic characterization. I didn't think it was particularly like revolutionary, but it maintains the kind of energy and kind of peculiarity of Holmes. I think it's one that I just need to watch a few more to gauge an actual kind of proper opinion on it as a series. I wouldn't want to be like, oh, I didn't like it when we've only spent like 50 minutes with him.
Yes.
But I gave it 3.25.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and I do agree with that, and I didn't think you'd love it. I mean, there's nothing technically that impressive with 70s and 80s like television. There isn't. I mean, it does look dated in terms of the production values and stuff like that. The reason I select them and some of the standout is because I think some of the writing and the acting and the drama is very good. So I do have another one that I plan to do in a few months' time. So I'd be interested to see how that compares for you. For me, I've gone 4 stars. I mean, this I think is the first memorable episode in the series, which is why I chose it. And I think Brett delivers that ultimate portrayal of Holmes, eccentric, moody and temperamental to the very end in every scene. And he's so reactionary with his face, and you're gonna get this and as we go on throughout the episodes. This episode in particular and the story is an interesting mystery. It works well as a short story. It's not complex at all, but it's a coded mystery around this character's hidden past. So I think it works well in a short story format. So 4 stars from me. We're going to play a little excerpt from that David Black interview, and then we'll be back for one of the most interesting parts of the show, which is Izzy's next choice.
He was absolutely devoted to the stories when they went on screen being faithful representations from the book, from the literary side of it. And he would carry that book around with him on the set, and if the director or the writers departed at all from the story, he would want to know why. He was almost puritanical about that. But at the same time, he had a sense of humor about himself.
You It is serious.
You could probably go into the middle of the Gobi Desert and say Sherlock Holmes, and someone there would know who you were talking about. You might get it with Winston Churchill, you might get it with Shakespeare. Watson, I think, an admirable man, and one that you often encounter in Shakespeare plays. He's the sort of stalwart friend.
What is it tonight? Morphine or cocaine?
Watson is quite vociferous in speaking out against drug taking.
I speak not only as your friend, but as a medical man. How can you risk such damage to the great powers with which you have been endowed?
Well, as a doctor, he would have been more aware than most of the dangers of drug taking. He would have been, and of course Conan Doyle was a doctor, and so he would almost certainly have come across it in his private practice.
Right, I'm very intrigued as to what you'll be choosing for the next episode following that delve into 80s television. So what have you got in store for myself and the listeners?
Well, very different. Swinging away from TV back into big Hollywood films.
Give us a clue.
It's going to be a returning performance for a big actress.
Well, you just a moment ago started singing something, I think, from a 1950s Western musical.
It's not a Western musical.
So,
I am really tempted to do that, but
Seven Brides.
I love Seven Brides, Seven Brothers. So I will be doing that at some point, probably this year, because I think it's been a while since I first showed it to you. So I think it's almost time for it to come back around. But I actually am really intrigued to watch this film because it's one of those films that I watched growing up, but I think I was too young really to understand, appreciate, and I haven't seen it since I was probably about 8, because it was one of my sister's favourite films, and I remember it being on. To be honest, the thing I remember most about it is probably the cat.
Oh yeah, I know what you're about to choose. Yeah, so you're going to go for Breakfast at Tiffany's.
I am going for Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Yeah, and this is very good because obviously it was on my list as well. And I think it is a film and a movie that does get a bit misrepresented a little bit in kind of being sold as a high fashionista film, whilst it is iconic for that very reason. And Audrey Hepburn is incredible in the way she looks and the costume, but it's far more complex on a character level, I think, this film. And I think it's very much related to the Truman Capote book.
Well, it's very different to that book.
I know, that's what I'm saying. It definitely bears that comparison in how character of Holly Golightly was written. But brilliant cast and a brilliant Hollywood production. Blake Edwards' film. This will be our second for the podcast after doing a very different movie that was Days of Wine and Roses.
And our second Audrey Hepburn film.
Second Audrey Hepburn film? Yes, of course we can compare that as well. This is brilliant. And I can't believe you've only seen this once so young.
I've seen it more than once, but I barely remember it.
Oh, this is a top film. This is a top film from Hollywood history, and
it's such a legacy film, isn't it? Like, there's some of the most iconic film shots ever of Audrey Hepburn in this big hat with the long cigarette holder.
And one of the few times that Audrey Hepburn has ever sung in a movie.
Yeah.
She wasn't a singer at all, and she did it in this.
Yeah.
She wasn't a natural at doing it. Really can't wait to watch this. I've seen it at least 4 or 5 times. And it's an easy one to return to, and you always gain something new out of it. A very interesting male leading performance as well from George Papard, who I think you're going to get a lot of like Robert Redford vibes from him in this. Great. Breakfast at Tiffany's, a big one to do in our next episode. So, as ever, we've been Couple Indemnity. We're on Apple, Spotify, and all the good podcast platforms. You can email us on coupleindemnity@gmail.com. We're on the socials as well, including X, Blue Sky, and we are also now on YouTube as well in audio form. So you can catch us on all of those platforms, where I often drop like previews of what we'll be covering next. And I drop a link in with all of our history of episodes, because we've been doing this for 1.5 years, coming up to 2 years.
Yeah.
This summer. So we'll be back next week with Breakfast at Tiffany's. See you then, guys.
Bye, guys.